Welcome to the Run for God Run Club, where you will find God in a runner's space.
Welcome to the Run for God Run Club. This is your one stop each week to be motivated and inspired to get off the couch and onto the running trail, where you can, in turn, inspire others to do the same. Let's learn, laugh, and leap into running together, giving God the glory for what we are able to do in His name. Amen. I am your running host, Dean Thompson. You know, we all like to be comfortable, but as we know, that is not where the best things happen. And we're going to share a story of getting outside our comfort zone today. And then I'm going to discuss an old phrase and apply it to our running and our faith. And then we're going to talk about a bunch of other stuff. And we'll discuss all that with, joining me is Run for God founder, Mitchell Hollis.
Thanks for having me, Dean. Friday starts fall.
Isn't that great?
Did you know that?
Wow. No, I didn't know
I'm ready
that.
for it.
I have not.
We've been getting out and walking some in the evenings, and man, it just feels so good. This morning, walked outside. It was about 6:30, 7 o'clock. Good gravy. It just felt good. I mean, it felt so good outside.
It's almost cold right now.
Yeah, I mean, I actually had a long sleeve shirt on early this morning, and so it's it's feeling good. Woo. My time of year.
Yeah.
Hey, before we get started, let's talk about our sponsor for this week. SecureMac.com are the makers of the popular security software MacScan 3. This software protects your computer from the threats targeting Macs, which are malware, keystroke loggers, and stalkerware. People nowadays are storing more and more of their information on their Macs, which provides an ever-growing target for hackers. Secure Mac has been educating users about security and privacy for over 20 years now. They even have a podcast to inform users on how to protect themselves online, and they can explain it in a way that everyone can understand. To try a free scan today, when you're ready to purchase, enter the code RUNNER for a special discount. Protect your Mac from the hackers that try to steal your security, and go to SecureMac.com today. So you mentioned on here Nicholas Raba, who is the founder of Secure Mac. He's part of Run Club.
Yeah. He's
one of us, so he does a great job with his software, and we're just glad to have Nicholas and his whole team as part of Run Club.
He occasionally sends me a helpful email.
Really?
Yeah, with some good feedback or suggestions and things like that. So good fellow.
So before we get going, you came in here this morning, and I've got to know you. I said, how was your weekend? You said, man, it's been a whirlwind of 36 hours or something. And I said, what happened? You said, we'll talk about it on the podcast. So let's talk about it now. What happened?
Yeah. Well, so Friday night, it was in the evening, and I made myself put all the ingredients in my mixer to make a shake, which I do frequently, right? And then I forgot about it. So it sat there on the mixer overnight. Well, Saturday, I came in and I was going to make a shake. Mm-hmm. And I thought, it's just fruit and stuff, and there's some almond milk in there, but almond milk wouldn't go bad, right? And so I thought, surely it's okay. I kind of opened it up, I smelled it, and I thought, it doesn't smell bad. So I decided to go ahead and mix it up and drink it. And I have discovered that it is not a good idea to leave that overnight and then mix it up the next day, because I had a rough overnight. I didn't sleep at all. Saturday night, my stomach was torn up. I could not.
That's like Russian roulette. That's like smelling the milk and it kind of doesn't smell right, but you're thinking, well, it's okay. That's like Russian roulette, Dean.
Well, I got the bullet this time.
You should have known better than that.
I should have. And, here's my problem. My problem is, I'm always trying to save $1 and save a penny here and there. And so it's like the thought of throwing that out just made my skin crawl a little bit. And so I thought, surely it'll be okay.
That is not at all what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be something else.
Oh, whoa, boy.
Wow. So don't mix something up and drink it the next day if it's not been put in the fridge, is what you're saying.
It was never mixed up. It was just sitting there waiting to be mixed up. So, I don't know.
So what was in it that you think got you?
Almond milk? I don't think the almond milk would.
Because fruit would.
It's usually fine. I've drank almond milk after sitting out a day, and it's been fine. And the fruit was frozen stuff when I put it in there. obviously it wasn't frozen when I got out. The one thing that I think it might have been the yogurt. There was some yogurt in there.
For sure. Yeah.
So I think the yogurt
That's
probably
dairy.
got me. Yep. So, but I made it.
All right.
I made it through. I'm fine.
So you won't die if you do it. You'll just not have a good weekend.
You will get terribly sick, and you will not be able to go far from a bathroom.
And you won't do it again.
And I won't do it again.
Wow.
Absolutely.
So now that everybody knows, that's a good way to start my Monday to have that picture in my head. Thanks, Dean.
Well, we'll talk about our Facebook post from last week. It comes from Melissa Rotarius. She said, so grateful to get a run in today. It felt so good. I have been having issues with my knee and hip for a while now. The 10-mile race 2 weeks ago finally aggravated whatever was going on to the point I could not take more than a few strides without sharp pain and then instantaneous swelling. After my long runs, my entire body would go into stress mode where my heart rate would stay elevated for several hours and would hurt just touching my skin. At first, I thought I was being weak and I needed to tough it out, as Dad would say. But after 5 days of rest, I realized how much pain I was actually in, and it was a clear sign I needed to let my body heal, so I took another week off. Just a couple shorter runs to test the waters. Praise God. I am so glad I did. I felt great this morning. Still not 100%, but I think I am able to continue with the half marathon training. Also went for an echocardiogram based on an abnormal EKG test result. My doctor says my heart rate is low, waiting on test results, hoping to get some answers. God bless Run Club.
Wow, that's a great post by Melissa. You know, she mentions that EKG test at the end. I think you knew this. Maybe we've talked about it, but you know, Lane had some abnormal heartbeats several years back. He was actually about to go out of the country for a race, and they have to get an EKG every year for USA Triathlon, and something abnormal was coming back with his heart. And we went to a cardiologist, and they explained that some athletes will have he dumbed it down for me, I'm sure, but he basically said it's an extra beat. And if you just typically do echocardiograms on the general population, that will show up as a red flag. But after he did whatever he did and knowing Lane's history, it's basically just an extra beat because the heart is so healthy, maybe. I don't know, but he basically chalked it up to nothing. So basically when Lane goes to get an EKG now, he has to do it at a cardiologist. He can't do it at a doctor's office because it'll pick that abnormal heartbeat up, but it's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's actually a good thing. So that kind of reminded me of that. You know, not saying that's what, I'm not a doctor by any means, Melissa, but that just made me think of that.
Yeah, well, and hopefully she gets an answer like that it's something that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, but we're seeing this more and more, especially right now. People talking about how good it feels in the runs. Yeah. You know, it's great when you tough it out through the summer. You do all the hard workouts, the long running, those long days in the heat, and it pays off this time of year. It just feels so good when you get out there.
Yeah. Well, I like that she tries to tough it out at first, right? She tries to keep going, and I think that's a good thing to do. There's a lot of people who, as soon as they start to feel anything abnormal, they just stop.
Right.
And I mean, is that okay? It's not bad. It just depends on where you are in your journey and that kind of thing. But I like the idea of just trying to push through it a little bit, and let's see if it's a big deal. Sure. And if I find out it's a big deal after a couple of days of pushing through it, then fine, then I'll take some time off. But I like that. Sometimes it's really obvious we should take time off. Of course, you know, sometimes it's so acute that it's like, okay, I got to take some time off, and that's fine too. But yeah, don't be afraid to try to push through something every once in a while. Just especially when it's just extra soreness or whatever. I know a lot of people who they'll run, especially with marathons. They'll run marathons and they'll be really, really, really sore for weeks, and they're afraid to get out and run because they're afraid they're going to hurt themselves further. But what I have found is if I'll get out there when I am sore like that, it's actually good for me.
Yeah, to make the soreness subside a little bit. Yeah.
Yep. So. And here's one of the things I thought about with this post is that we live in a society these days where people exaggerate everything, you know?
Yeah.
You have these people who, they don't have a cold. They always have the worst cold ever.
Yeah.
You know, the people who don't have a sore quad.
I know a few of those people.
It's the worst quad. It's not just a sore quad. You know, I've pulled a muscle and I've got all sorts of, you know, that person, right? We've all seen that person. And we have to be careful that we don't make things out to be worse than they are, because a lot of times I think we have a tendency to do that sometimes. And it depends on the personality. I know other people who are on the other end of that spectrum. You're probably one of them, where when something starts to hurt, you're like, it'll be fine. And you got to be careful with that extreme too.
I specifically remember a stress fracture from running with some guy that was faster than me for too long, and I just ignored. I even made the comment to this guy. I said, I feel like somebody kicked me in the shin. And he's like, I'll just keep going. And I did. Yeah. And it wound up being a stress fracture. But I don't know who that guy is.
I wonder who that was. You'd think he would have known better, wouldn't you?
Yeah. You know, what is it? They always say if you're going to be dumb, you got to be tough.
Yeah.
Something like that. Because
that's me.
It takes a little bit for it to sink in for me. So
yeah, no question. All right. Well, we had a trivia question for last week, and it was this. For how long did Forrest Gump run when he ran across America in the movie Forrest Gump? I never thought about this, and I just happened to see an article on this, and so I thought it would be a great trivia question. Of course, this comes from the 1994 classic film Forrest Gump. If you haven't heard of it, then I don't know where you've been, but I know that is a number of years ago. So if you're younger, maybe you haven't heard of Forrest Gump. I don't know. But at one point, he decides to go running in this movie, and according to Forrest in the movie, he just said, "I just felt like running," and I get that feeling. Yeah. Sometimes I just feel like running. Anyway, he goes out and he just goes and starts running, and he just keeps going. He starts in Greenbow, Alabama, which is where he's from. And he went across the United States 5 times. And so if you look at the route and you look at the movie and you look at the clues that are in the movie, the monuments he passes, the towns he's clearly in, and some of the things that are said, again, we know that he began running on October 1st, 1979, due to the fact that when Forrest runs past a cafe on his first day, we hear a radio announcement stating that President Carter has collapsed from heat exhaustion, which is the date that happened. So they give you this clue to tell you exactly the date that it starts. And we know that he went from there, he went to Santa Monica. They say Santa Monica, that he went to Santa Monica. We just assume it's Santa Monica, California, and not somewhere else. And then again, he continues. He goes back and forth. You see the scenery in the background as he's running. It just kind of, it's one of those scenes where it just plays a little bit of music, and it's showing you some things. And so you see all of these things. And then eventually we know that he decides to stop in Monument Valley, Arizona, because he's clearly in Monument Valley when he just stops and says he thinks he's done. So the film tells us that he ran for a total of 3 years, 2 months, 14 days, and 16 hours. Not sure how they got the hours out of this, but that's what this analysis told us. Forrest Gump ran an estimated total of 15,248 miles during his 5-time trip across the USA. He averaged 91 miles per week with an average speed of 0.54 miles per hour. This equates to 13 miles or 21 kilometers per day, which is slightly less than a half marathon per day. In total, throughout his 3-year adventure, Forrest would have burned over 2 million calories just from running. And I think it's interesting. He wears these Nike Cortez shoes, which were a thing in the early 70s. It was one of the only running shoes back then. And that, if you put a pair of those on your feet now, you go, oh, these feel terrible. They're not good running shoes. But back then, it's what they had.
So kudos to the producers of that movie that it is kind of realistic. I mean, somebody could do that.
They could. They absolutely could. As a matter of fact, people have in much shorter time, actually.
I'm waving at people as they drive by. I didn't even think about it.
That's good.
Sorry. Rabbit trail.
But Forrest says in the movie, he says, those must be comfortable shoes. I bet you could walk all day in shoes like those and not feel a thing. Sounds like Forrest, right? But anyway, that's... I was a little disappointed to find out he was only running 13 miles a day.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people have run across the United States and run a lot more than 13 miles per day. Right?
That's 13 miles a day every day for
3.5 years.
3.5 years.
That's a lot.
That is. That's
a lot.
That's consistency right there.
Yeah. But there's a lot of people.
If we all had that consistency, we would do big things, wouldn't we?
Well,
that's
absolutely
13
true.
miles a day, every day for 3.5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And I imagine I don't know if there were any, we don't know. The movie doesn't tell us. There may have been break days in there.
Yeah.
He may have just taken a break for a few days.
See, I thought you were going to do a trick on us. I thought you were going to do a trick and say, well, Tom Hanks actually only ran half a mile in filming that. Something like that.
That would have been good.
That's some good trivia, Dean.
Yeah, yeah. You're listening to the Run for God Run Club podcast. Are you a member of the Run for God Run Club? If you're not, you should be. You not only get access to the video version of this podcast, but so much more. We have hundreds of videos, from how-tos to inspirational stories, and you get discounts in the Run for God store too. And there's so much more, from training plans to all sorts of things. Maybe most importantly, you get access to the best online community that you will find anywhere. So, not only should you subscribe to this podcast, rate it, and share it with your friends, but you should go to runforgod.com and join Run for God Run Club today. All right, we're back in. I got a couple of stories in the past week, so that's good. Some folks have submitted stories, and that's fantastic. We still need more. Don't let up. We still need more. But submit your story. Runforgod.com. You write your story. You go in there, and it kind of guides you through submitting some questions and some scriptures, and it's really simple. So if you haven't done it yet, get out there and go do it. Well, I saw an interesting post recently, and it was. I thought it was a great question, right? It basically said, if carbs and grains are so fattening, why are Asian people thinner than Americans? Because they eat noodles and rice at pretty much every meal, right? And it's a great question, right? And of course, I think that can be extended to other cultures as well. The Kenyans are famously very carbohydrate heavy in their diets. And of course, the last I checked, they run pretty fast. Right. And there's a couple of things I'd like to say about this. First, one of the things that was said over and over again in responses to this post was that it's all these processed foods that we eat. And I get it. We do probably eat more processed foods in America than anywhere else on the planet. That is a fact. But I got to thinking about it from this standpoint. There's only one nation in the world that is more obese than America, a higher percentage of obesity than Americans, and that's Mexico. Well, Mexico is not famous for eating a lot of processed foods. So if the Mexicans are more obese than we are, then that must not be the number one reason, at least. It may be part of the reason, but it's not the number one reason. And so that made me think, and I think it's just portions.
It absolutely is. We were just having this conversation a few days ago. We were having lunch, and you couldn't eat it all. I mean, it seems like it's that way everywhere you go nowadays. Even if you go to a fast food restaurant, if you order like a combo or something, it starts at medium. It doesn't even start at small, and then it just goes up from there, where it's like these gallon jugs of drinks they give you, and it's absolutely portion size.
Yeah.
If you took that, even look at plates, even look at Chinaware nowadays. Back I remember in going to my grandparents' house when I was young, a plate was
9 or 10 inches.
8 to 10 inches. Well, now they're 14 inches. Even the plates are bigger nowadays. Yeah. So I think it's absolutely, we eat till we're stuffed too many times. And speaking of the Asians, I mean, they just don't.
That's
they
right.
still have, what is it called? The tapas? Is it small plates?
Yeah.
We call it small plates in America, but that's the normal thing in other countries. That's the normal serving size, but we call it's like a thing you go to nowadays. It's kind of cool because it's little plates. Well, that's probably the right serving size.
Yeah, we're really bad. I mean,
We are.
And we go. The reason why restaurants have such large portions is because we tend to go to those because we like them, because we feel like we're getting value for our money. At least that's the way I look at it a lot of times. And so, and then here's the other thing about going back to the processed foods idea. Processed foods are lower in nutritional density. And so if you're eating a lot of that kind of food, in order to get enough nutrition in your body, you have to eat more. Mm-hmm. And so that's the other thing where they kind of go together. But I think usually the answer, Occam's razor, the most simple explanation is probably the explanation.
Sure.
And I think that it's just calories in versus calories out, period. Right. We just eat too much. I bet, and I know this because I've heard people, I haven't traveled internationally very much, but if you ask people who have, they'll tell you that the portion sizes are smaller in every other country.
Yeah.
Well, this was a Facebook post that we thought was so good, and it was very long, and so we thought we wanted to make it a story. She posted this back a few months ago, I guess, and we thought, well, let's, instead of using that as a Facebook post of the week, let's save it for later. Mm-hmm. We'll add some questions and some scripture references to it, and so that's what this is. Sure. This comes from Michelle Christensen. This is a story she didn't mean to write, but she wrote anyway.
It's funny how that happens.
I put a title on it that is "Comfort Can Only Be Temporary." Good morning, friends. I haven't posted in here much lately, but I know you've seen Seth's post of his progress. This is going to be a somewhat long dedication to the goodness of God that I hope encourages somebody to keep fighting the good fight of faith and pursue long obedience toward their God dreams. It has been a challenging year in a few ways, and God is doing some new things. I wanted to share this with you all because it is a testament to God's goodness and faithfulness when we aren't sure if we can even or even should take one more step. Have you ever just felt bone tired of the grind and asked God how much longer you should keep going in a certain direction? I think this is an even easier question to bring to our Father when the unexpected losses, hurts, and challenges of life seem to progress from an annoying dripping faucet to a steady stream before it's repaired. In the chaos that surrounded the last few weeks, or maybe even months and years to be honest, I have felt my focus of being obscured on some of the big things, like our run or walk for God training to prepare for our August races. It just felt like everywhere I turned, people were too busy or had other plans or were doing their own things, and even though I had scheduled it on our church calendar, I just assumed no one would come. I told my friend Becky, who has quite the testimony of healing in her family that started with Run for God 2 years ago, that something needed to shift and we might be changing our traditional meeting time. But I didn't have the answer at that moment, so we prayed. Lo and behold, God answered in two surprising ways. First, He used my daughter Abigail's new track friend, Ella. She had attended our church missions banquet back in April and expressed her interest in Run for God as it was on the list of ministry events we host for missions. She reached out more than once asking about when we were starting, and even though they had an out-of-town company visiting, she said she would be coming to the following meeting. The next thing caught me completely off guard because I don't always look at my Facebook memories. It has been a season of releasing the past and healing forward. But yesterday afternoon, I just felt the nudge to check them. I was messaging people to see if they could come out after our Sunday night prayer service for our Run for God meetup for the season to make summer plans. And there it was. I found a memory from 2014 where I had started training my teenage class at church to prepare for the 5K. Of course, yesterday was the exact date we started our training back in 2014. And of course, would you know that my friend Becky, who prayed with me, was in that Wednesday night church class? What was I thinking? This running newbie stepped out in faith with a heart fully submitted to God, retrained by the Holy Spirit after 12 years out of the sport with one care of the details. I had never heard of Run for God and had been putting together my own program at the church for physical, mental, and spiritual health that we fondly called PMS, physical, mental, spiritual. It was catchy for our ladies as it was born out of our women's ministry. Our poor assistant pastor had to talk about it every week. I'm sure he was very grateful that Run for God came into our church in 2018 after many desperate prayers for direction and a miraculous Facebook post that popped up advertising the program. At that time, I had almost completely lost my confidence and asked another person to teach it because I thought no one would come if I was the teacher. I'm recognizing a pattern here in this season. Boy, the enemy sure knows how to mess with us and play on our insecurities. I could say so much more, but the biggest message I want to leave you with is that we have to let God say when something is done being used by Him. We may think we are too tired, out of ideas, or just plain confused on what forward looks like anymore, but God. Be sure to pray and open your hands to Him. But don't put a period where He only meant for there to be a comma. Or He might just be writing the second book in a series with some new characters, new storylines, and exciting plot twists. I am praying that someone here chooses long obedience over temporary comfort. That someone keeps chasing that God dream no matter how far away it still appears. That God gives you a new oil and fresh fire to fulfill His purposes on earth. And that you see the wonder-working hand of God in every faithful step. Keep moving forward, friends.
Great job, Michelle, even though she didn't know that this was going to become a story. You know, Michelle and Seth, they're the ones that come down to the Hawkins 10K every year.
That's right.
And bring the cheese curds from Wisconsin. So it's funny how we associate people with things. And
the cheese curd people.
They're cheese curd people, yeah. But great people. I mean, gosh, you just can't help but love them to death. I mean,
for sure.
Seth is one of those souls that he's quiet, kind of sheepish, but I just love to talk to him. Mm-hmm. He's such a cool guy to talk to.
He is. Well, and the evil one's working overtime to discourage us at all times. He puts these thoughts in our mind, and all these discouraging thoughts that Michelle talks about here. I mean, those are all things that's all it is. It's just Satan trying to put these thoughts in your head, and we have to be careful with that. And the other thing is, we see people who are confident or appear confident, and we think they never have doubts, right? A lot of people look at me from a running standpoint and they think, well, he doesn't ever have to doubt himself. Well, yeah, I do. I may not be doubting whether or not I'm going to finish a race, but I'm doubting whether I can hurt as bad as I want to run the time I want to run, or beat the person that I want to beat, or there are doubts in there. Well,
the thing we got to understand is I think where the devil a lot of times uses doubt and fear is that, you know, sure, I may look at you and say, well, Dean never has a problem with his running. He never gets discouraged in that. And you may be right. But the devil will make you think that because Dean doesn't doubt in his running, that he doesn't struggle anywhere in his life.
Yeah.
And I may not have problems in the areas where you have problems.
That's right.
And that's why so many times we've got to talk these things out. The devil wants to keep us silent because he doesn't want you to know that, Dean struggles. He doesn't struggle in his running, but he struggles here. Mm-hmm. Well, I may not struggle in that place, but I struggle in my running. So that is a perfect match for a conversation. You encourage me in this area that I struggle with, and I encourage you in that area that you struggle with. That is the body of Christ. But the evil one wants to keep us silent about these things, and everybody go to their own corners and think that they're the only ones dealing with these situations. And, you know, we hear so much about mental health in this country right now. And you know, it's blown up in ways that probably shouldn't be. But at the end of the day, I'm convinced that the mental health issues in this country today we are lonelier than we've ever been. Especially young people. They get on their phones and they think they're the only ones dealing with this thing. And that because those pictures that I'm seeing are perfect, they don't struggle with anything. Meanwhile, that person that is portraying to be perfect on the other end, they're thinking, I'm having to do all these things to appear perfect when I know I'm not. When the answer to the many of the problems, and I'm not oversimplifying the mental health issues that we have in our country today, but most of it can be boiled down to we just don't have human interaction anymore.
Yeah.
Quality human interaction. Yes, Facebook friends are not your friends.
Yeah.
Let's put that out there. Instagram followers, they're not your friends. You need to interact with people. I saw a post. I'm sorry, I'm getting on a rabbit trail with this, but I saw a post the other day, and it was talking about a daughter who she had an elderly father. You might have saw this, and she went to pick him up on a Saturday morning. He wanted her to take him to the grocery store and to the bank and buy McDonald's, I think is what it was, to get something to eat. And she did all that, and it took the majority of the day to do all that. Mm-hmm. And they come home, and the daughter sat Dad down, and she said, Dad, I'm going to show you some things that would really help you. And she started to show him, online banking and how you can get your groceries delivered. And we have DoorDash nowadays. And he stopped her and he said, look, what you don't understand is when I walked into the bank, I saw 5 friends that I haven't seen all week. When I went into the grocery store, I got to talk to the cashier and encourage her and leave her a tip. And then I went to McDonald's and I saw some more friends. He said, if I didn't go do that, yes, it took all day long, but that is my mental health.
Yep.
That is what keeps me going. And if you take all of that away, I'm lonely and sitting in this house.
Yep.
And I know I went down a rabbit trail there, but
that's so true.
At the end of the day, it's human interaction. It's going to church and interacting with other believers. It's getting involved in Bible studies and having those close, intimate relationships, whether it's Run for God or it's something else.
Yeah.
Surround yourself with like-minded people, and the mental health issues that plague our country will flee.
Yep, that's true. Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. Of course, we've talked about this verse a number of times, and the one thing that kind of stood out to me this time was the first word, trust. Trust is a really tough word these days. Even the experts we have found out over the last few years, they're just not trustworthy.
Sure.
And so when all of these people around us are not trustworthy, the idea of trust has just kind of been so eroded, right? And so trust, obviously, is the basis for all relationships, right? I mean, what if you didn't trust your wife?
Right.
The people who wind up having terrible marriages are the ones that don't trust each other.
Sure.
Right? And so we have to trust. And it's the same with God. And if we don't have trust in Him, then the rest of that verse doesn't mean anything. And the thing about it is with my wife, I have every reason to trust her, right? Because she's proven over and over and over again that I should trust her with anything. And it's the same with God. He has proven over and over and over again that we have every reason to trust Him. And so we should. And that's this whole idea of trust is one of the, trust and truth are two words that have really been a big deal to me recently. And I like what the Jewish folks do. They have this festival of booths where one time a year they basically build themselves a booth, a tent, a structure, and they live in it. They camp out in it for I think it's a week, and they do this to remind themselves of what happened and how God provided while the Jews were out in the wilderness. And that's a great idea. And I think we all need to, at some point in time, at least once or twice a year, take a step back and really evaluate, why should I trust God?
Right.
And you'll find all sorts of reasons, right?
Well, and yeah, I mean, we talked about this verse last night. We went through this podcast as a family last night, and this verse is really the nexus of what you believe, because how do you hear from God, or how do you audibly hear from God? For me, I read the Bible out loud. That is audibly hearing God speak. And if we believe that the Bible is the inerrant word of God, if it's God speaking to us, and we know that He is sovereign, omnipotent, omniscient, all the O's, then what do we do with this verse? Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. That's where we trip up so many times, because we want to go to what's logical. You know, we were talking last night, Lane, he's injured again. And, you know, going down to some of the questions, and we'll probably come back to this, but one of the questions is, I don't remember what the question was down below, but anyway, Lane was talking about how his understanding of the situation is different than what he feels God is calling on his life. And so many times it's when our understanding, but what we know God is probably saying, what God is saying, is different. The question is, where do you fall? Do you fall to your own understanding, or do you go to God? Because it says, in all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your path straight. It doesn't say He'll make your path easy. It doesn't say it's going to be, flowers and roses. It's going to be hard, but it's going to be worth it. So I love this verse because it really hits it at the heart of what do you believe? Do you believe everything you say you believe? If so, live by this verse.
Yeah.
But that's easier said than done.
It is. Habakkuk 1:5. Look at the nations and watch, and be utterly amazed, for I am going to do something in your days that you would not believe, even if you were told. If we look at what God has done and is doing, we will be amazed, but so many times we're obfuscating what God has done and what He is doing. How often are we amazed by a coincidence, right? Something happens and we go, man, it was really great. And a lot of times we'll say, well, God provided the right thing at the right time. We should be amazed at that.
Do you really believe that?
Yes.
That's the first question.
Yes.
Do you really believe that?
Yeah, I think it's just sometimes it's just something to say rather than something to be believed and to internalize and realize just how incredible God is when He does those kinds of things, right? And so I think one day when it talks about these words, utterly amazed, I love, because I always think about the book of Revelation. Why is the book of Revelation, for me, the book of Revelation is hard to read? Because the visions that it paints are really strange, right? And in our eyes, we kind of don't get it. But the truth is when Christ comes back, we can't describe it. No. We don't know what it's going to be utterly amazing. And so you couldn't describe it if you wanted to. Yeah,
it's funny you say that. We're actually that's the chapter that we're going through as a family right now, and we're doing it a little bit different this time. We've went through Revelations of family before, but this time I've got my big I should know, I think it's Thomas Nelson commentary.
Yeah.
We're reading. Usually we go a chapter at a time every night, but we're breaking it down into sections. So bite-sized sections, and we're reading the commentary at the same time and really breaking it down. And cool. It's funny how in the commentary it talks about how there's things that we have seen before, all of us, that we say it's indescribable. That word's used a lot, but there are really things that we've seen before that we have a hard time describing. Whether it's something I'm thinking of things I've seen in the woods before, and you're like, well, I think it was a bobcat, but maybe it was a coyote, and I'm trying to explain it. And that's what John was doing in Revelation. It's like he saw these visions, but he's never seen this stuff before. So it's like trying to describe something that you obscurely saw in the woods, me trying to describe that to you, and you're sitting there going, I have no idea what you're trying to say. I know what it looks like,
right?
But trying to get you to understand it is hard to do. So if you put yourself in John's shoes, Revelations makes a little more sense.
It does,
by
yeah.
some of the words that he uses, which you're thinking, that's just crazy. But if I was trying to describe that thing I saw in the woods, it probably sounds crazy because I can't paint that picture for you.
That's right. Yeah. Habakkuk 2:2-3. Then the Lord said to me, write my answer plainly on tablets so that a runner can carry the correct message to others. This vision is for a future time. It describes the end, and it will be fulfilled. If it seems slow in coming, wait patiently, for it will surely take place. That's a New Living Translation, in case you're trying to follow along at home. It's kind of a looser translation, but I like that translation. And I never looked at this I never looked at this as a running verse necessarily, but it's interesting. Back in that day, it made me think about this. Back in that day, messages were a big deal. Sure. If you wanted to send a message back in that day, particularly one that was written, it was a big deal. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, messages, all I got to do is pull my phone out of my pocket and I can send a message to somebody all the way around the world in a matter of seconds.
Yeah, I texted my nephew. He lives in Indonesia now.
Yeah.
And a few weeks ago, I sent him a text message. And you're right. Back in these days, I sent it and it was there in 3 seconds and he responded to me.
Yeah.
Back in these days, that would have been years.
Yeah.
Years to get that message to him.
That's right. That's right. So we have this problem because back in that day, when a message came to you back then, it was clear this was important because look at all the preparation that went into preparing and getting that thing sent to you. Well, nowadays, because there's so many messages and they're coming at us from all angles, I mean, think about all the different ways you can get a message these days. It's not just text message. There's a million different ways. Which ones are important and which ones are not? That is the hardest thing to figure out these days, is which messages are important. Because we know, even in the Bible, back in the day, there were false prophets. The Bible talks about there being false prophets, right? And so when we get messages, we get false messages. Mm-hmm. Some of them we should listen to and some of them we shouldn't. Back in that day, there were people that people should listen to and others that they shouldn't listen to. And how did you know which ones were which? And of course, all that hinges on how close are we to God?
Sure.
How is our relationship with Him? Question. Have you ever gotten tired of doing a good thing? We've all done that, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things that I do. Sometimes I think it would be great if somebody else would teach our Sunday school class. I mean, it's every week you got to prepare for that, and I love it. I love it, and that's why I'm still doing it, because I love it. But every once in a while, it's like that's one more thing I got to get ready for and got to do, but it's a good thing. Yeah. Right. And sometimes we get tired of the responsibilities that we have. I did a rare thing this Saturday. I went rafting with a youth group at the church. Well, that took up almost the entire day, and now I feel like I'm behind and I can't get caught back up. Because I took half of my day and applied it to something that was fun. Yeah, and that's bad when we get to that point, right? But we get there. Because we get tired. We get weary.
But that's okay. That's okay. I think that's what we're called to do. We're called to do hard things and then take it to God when we get tired and weary, and He'll give us the strength. I was we started a family discipleship class yesterday morning at our church, and it's really cool. It's kind of like a Run for God class in that, there was people 70 years old, and then we had we didn't have any high schoolers. We had college age in there, so it was all ages. But it was a family discipleship class, and Thomas, who's teaching it, he said, I'm going to be coming at this from a how to deal with your kids standpoint. He said, but even if you don't have kids, these principles are the same. It could be with a friend or it could be with a coworker or whatever, but I'm going to be, anyway, he said, and when we read through this last night, I said, what Thomas said really applies here, because he was talking about indoctrination of kids and how we use that as a bad term nowadays.
Yeah.
And so many parents nowadays, they don't want to indoctrinate their kids. And he said, I don't know how we've gotten here. He said, but you should absolutely be indoctrinating your kids, because your kids will be indoctrinated.
That's right.
Whether you're doing it. And he said so many parents, their kids get into high school and they say, we want to let them make their own decisions. We want to let them choose which path and this is from a spiritual standpoint. We want to let them choose, and they kind of get hands off. And he said, but those same parents come Saturday morning, they will say, you need to get your Georgia Bulldogs gear on because it's game day.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, you better not wear orange in this house on game. He said, so the point is, we need to be as passionate about driving our kids towards Jesus as we are about so many other things.
Yeah.
But so many times parents, they go hands off there, and you can get weary there.
Yeah.
I get it. I mean, they get to high school and there's so many other forces pulling at them that it gets hard.
Yeah.
It gets really hard. But that's where you've almost got to double down even more, because it's the fight. Who was it made the comment? It said it's the race to the heart of a child. The first one that gets there wins.
Yeah. I don't remember who said that, but I remember.
I want to say
it
it was Kaz that said that.
I think you're right. Yeah. Yeah.
That and that race is not always won when they're little.
That's right.
It's to get to that heart and secure it. Sometimes it's on up into those years where they're fighting you on these things and they're making excuses and they've got other things coming at them, and that can get very tiring. Yeah. Now, take that same stance and apply it to another family member or a coworker or an acquaintance or a friend. The same thing applies. It can get hard to try to win that person to Christ, but that doesn't mean we should give up. We shouldn't we're going to get weary, but we should take it to God to be
That's right.
rejuvenated.
Good point. Another question: how do you make time not to not just talk, but listen to the Lord for His plans and purposes? That's always the hardest thing, right? To be still, to find time to do nothing, as you always like to say. It's hard and as a runner, I think you have this tendency to want to drive all the time, and that's the talking part, right? Mm-hmm. So if I want to get something done, I just go do it. I go get that thing done, and so it's really hard sometimes to slow down enough to not do that. And running is good for this, because now you want to be careful you don't go too far, but running is really good at keeping us calm and getting us to a point where we have to slow down. We have to slow our mind down at least, right? And it gives us time to open up our mind while we go out and run. Again, you don't want that to be your quiet time. Sure. But it is good for additional quiet time. Mm-hmm. So that's a good thing.
Thomas said something also yesterday in that discipleship class. He was kind of talking about this very thing, and he said, we need to learn to do less of, he said, identify the things that frustrate you about society. Identify what those are. And then identify the things that amaze you about God. He said, because the answer is different. And as he was talking through this, I realized mine is nature. I've talked about, I can go deer hunting and sit in the woods and see the world come to life. And that's just amazing, the sunrises and the sunsets. But for some people, he said one of his things is watching people run who are good at it. Yeah. He said, even if that person is not a Christian running, he said their ability is obvious. It's obvious that it's God-given. And that amazes me about God, watching that person run, even though that person may be lost as the day is long.
Yeah.
We need to identify what amazes us about God and do more of that. Identify the things that frustrates about society and do less of that. But the crazy thing is, we reverse it.
Yeah, we do.
The thing that frustrates me about society is watching the news.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. I probably watch the news more than I read my Bible, and that is wrong.
Yeah.
And that is opposite. It's opposite what he says.
Yeah.
Social media.
Yeah.
How many times do we put down the phone from looking at our social media and going, man, that was so uplifting? We don't.
Right. We don't. No.
We put our phone down and we're like, how many times have I taken social media off my phone?
Yeah.
Because of that very reason. So we need to do more of the things that reveal what amazes us about God, do less of the things that frustrates us about society. But there again, up is down, down is up, north is south. I mean, it's our society has gotten everything so backwards, and we fall into that trap.
Boy, that's a mouthful. Last question. Has your faith ever been tested to the point of questioning your direction in life? Has anybody not been there at some point in time? At some point in time, we all question whether or not our faith is strong enough, or what we believe and how fervently we believe whatever it is we believe. I think we've all gotten to that point where we cry out to God and wonder, where am I? Where am I going? What is this all about? And am I faithful enough? Am I worthy? And then, of course, the answer to that's no. But the other answer is he has made a way. And it's so simple sometimes, and yet again we make it complicated. And I'm going to share a story next week kind of along those lines, where we complicate things. And sometimes it's really simple. When we question our faith, go back to the basics and God will reveal the truth to us.
I call these the sitting in the church in the middle of the day times.
Yeah.
I've talked about some heavy situations in my past where I found myself sitting in the church in the middle of the day with nobody there, with the lights off, crying out to God. And I don't know if we talked about that. I couldn't remember if we talked about this on a previous podcast, but you and I listened to a podcast on a road trip here a while back. And the gentleman that was speaking, he was actually preaching in a church, and he said he got to a point in his life where everything was just falling apart and the wheels were coming off, and he cried out to God and he said, God, just take this away from me. And he said, as audibly as probably I've ever heard God before say, he said, why would I do that? We haven't been this close in years. And man, that is so convicting, because when do we go to the church in the middle of the day with the lights off?
When things aren't going so well.
When things aren't going so well. What if we did that when things were going well? What if we did that? Might we have less of those times where the wheels are rolling up? I don't know.
But it's probable.
But it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But we when things are good, we blow by the church at 60 miles an hour.
It's true.
In the middle of the day.
So true.
But we sometimes we need to turn that blinker on and pull in. I think that would help a lot.
Wow, great point.
Would you like to experience the Bible in a different way than you've ever done before? Well, you can join me, Coach Dean, as I read through the entire Bible every day for a full year. You don't want to miss hearing this transplanted Southern boy try to pronounce those biblical names now, do you? It may be good for a laugh. In addition, I share running and walking tips and some inspirational quotes along the way. Get your daily dose of the Bible from a runner's perspective in the Run for God Run Club Walk Through the Bible. You must be a member of the Run Club to get access. So if you're not a member, join today. If you are a member, just find a Walk Through the Bible under the Nationwide Challenge tab.
So what if a doctor said to a runner, you need to stop running marathons and stick to 5Ks. It's bad for your heart.
I have to get a second opinion.
Of course, and you could substitute, whether it's your heart or your knees or it's any other part of your body. There's a lot of non-running doctors that try to talk runners down from doing what they do. But I guess the question is, yes, my first thought is find another doctor. I've done that before. I've had a doctor one time tell me back when I was young, said you don't need to be running. It's bad for your knees. And I'm like, I don't like that answer. I'm going to go somewhere else.
Nothing to back it up at that time, but you just knew you didn't like it.
That's right. Yep. But here's why I wanted to talk about this. As with anything, moderation is important. We just talked about it a little bit ago about how Americans eat too much. Mm-hmm. We're just not good at moderation. Right. We're so bad with moderation. Most people aren't too close to that edge from a running standpoint. Most people do running in moderation. I guess if I'm thinking of moderation, I think 35 to 40 miles a week to me is moderate. Mm-hmm. For some people, that would be a lot. And I think it all depends on the intensity that you do something. So, if I run 40 miles at 8-minute pace, that's probably about equal to maybe 35 miles at 10-minute pace. There's a speed and distance time kind of formula there that I'm sure somebody could figure out that tells you what's kind of equivalent. But here's the thing. When you get up too much and you do too much of anything, there's a law of diminishing returns that kicks in. And I think that's what happens with running. I think that at some point in time, there's a law of diminishing returns. Now, here's back to that question that was asked. If you're running marathons just to get in shape and have better doctor's visits, you're going the wrong way. That's not a good reason to run a marathon because it is too much, right, for that. Now, if you're doing it because I want to check off something hard on a checklist and I've always wanted to do one, or I just love doing them and I love the feeling and I just love running, there's a lot of good reasons to run a marathon. But it's not, I'm going to get in shape to run, and that's going to get me to where I want to be as far as shape goes. So running a marathon's tough on your body. Mm-hmm. I mean, it just is. You and I have both felt that in a pretty profound way. And so you just have to have good reasons for why you do what you do. And if a doctor tells you you're doing too much, that you don't need to run as much as you do, just evaluate what's the trade-off.
Sure.
So for me, I run 7 days a week. There's a lot of doctors, not just doctors, a lot of physical therapists, a lot of people in general who would tell you shouldn't run 7 days a week. It's not good for you. I don't care. Because here's the thing. I know what the consequences are, sure. Right? I understand the consequences. And that's all I'm saying is whether you do too much or too little of something, understand what the consequences are. Right. And in my case, I know what the consequences of doing a little too much is. And I'm okay with it, and I'm fine with them. So,
yeah, I mean, you're right. It's the idea of you eat too much, so you go the opposite way and you eat nothing. Well, that's
wrong.
That's bad for you.
Yep.
It's finding that happy median that works for you. For some people, 1,500 calories a day is what they want to do, and it works for them. But for some people, it's a runner. It may be 4,000 calories a day, and that is the happy median. I think the point you're making is you got to find what works for you.
Yep.
And sometimes we got to quieten the inputs that we've talked about before.
Yep. And you want to listen to your doctor, but you don't. You want to realize you've got input into that as well. Right. All right. It's time for Dean's Thoughts. That's a time when I share something I've written about the intersection between running and faith. Have you ever heard the phrase, "The game is not worth the candle"? I hadn't heard it until recently. I thought it was a pretty cool saying. So this one's called "The Game is Not Worth the Candle." Way back in 1580, French writer Michel de Montaigne used the phrase, "The game is not worth the candle." Back in those days, candles were fairly expensive items, and as it is today, gamblers seem to prefer doing their thing in the dark of night. In that day, the participants had to pay for their illumination to be able to see what they were doing. If the stakes were not high enough to pay for their lighting, the game was not worth the money to pay for the candles. The game was not worth the candle. We have those same choices today, though it may take much different forms. For example, I'm not a big fan of crowds. Consequently, I don't go to many concerts. For me, the game, seeing the concert, is not worth the candle, dealing with the crowd. With a little imagination, you can see many circumstances to which you could apply this phrase. We don't use it much these days, but it's very descriptive. For some people, Running is the game, and the difficulty level of the activity is the candle. They're just not willing to pay the price of suffering a little for what they see as little payback. To all of those people who say, if you see me running, someone is chasing me, the game is not worth the candle. But I want to push back a little on those naysayers. You see, the problem is that their perceptions are all wrong. While it makes sense that they want to avoid using the candle, I don't think most people fully appreciate the benefit. Let me go back to the concert analogy. I have loved the group Rush since I was in high school. One of the 3 members died a few years ago. What if, by a miracle, I could go see them one last time? Would I be willing to endure the crowd? You better believe it. That cost would be nothing compared to what the payoff would be. I feel like most people just don't understand the benefit of running or walking enough to pay the price. The other problem lies in the game itself. Back in the days of poker games, entrants to the game had to pay the price whether they won or not. The harsh reality was that they could walk up to the game and lose all of their money, but they also had a chance of winning. A lot of people may look at diet and exercise as if it's a poker game. In their minds, there may be a benefit, but it's not guaranteed. And to make their point, they refer to Jim Fixx, the runner-rider who died while out on a run one day. But here's the thing. You may not reap all the benefits of running or walking, but your chances are far greater than the guy entering that poker game. The vast majority can substantially feel the benefits after just a month or two. Our walk with Christ comes with a big price tag. Sure, the gift of Jesus is freely given to all who accept his death and resurrection as atonement for their sins, but it doesn't stop there. The Bible tells us to pick up our cross and follow him. That doesn't sound free, but the game is worth the candle. Living a life for Christ will be worth the cost, whether the benefit comes in blessings while we're in this world or the reward of heaven at the end of this life. The game is absolutely worth the candle. As humans, we're always going to count the cost before doing anything. It is the prudent thing to do. Just make sure you understand the benefit before you decide whether or not you're going to take a place at the table.
That's a great story, Dean.
You know, I can obviously feel the benefits of running, and I want other people to feel it too. And so, I think the reason why people don't think it's worth it is because they never get to that point where they're in good enough shape to feel it. You know what I mean? A lot of people, like if somebody does the 5K challenge class, they're going to get improved fitness and they're going to get better. Mm-hmm. But I don't know that it's quite enough to feel the full benefits of running, you know? And so I want everybody to feel that because I feel like if people felt that, people would be more willing to do it. And I don't know how you get people to that point, though.
You know, I think this is where personalities, preferences come into play. I don't know why when you were reading that, I was going back to Thomas's talk Sunday morning about find the things that amaze you about God. You know, because I think about, I look at running and walking the same way. Mm-hmm. Not to the extent that you do, but I know exactly what you're talking about. But I also, to me, getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and going and climbing in a stand 30 minutes before daylight is worth the candle.
Yeah, I
know the benefit of it. It's not the deer. It's not the deer that I have the opportunity of taking. It's seeing the world come to life. So to me, but for you, you would say it's not worth it, even though this is going to be the year where I get you out there. I'm going to make this happen. But I think your analogy here is valid on many different things. Right. Well, you say that, yeah. But it's finding those things where you see God at work. Because let's be honest, you've talked about how you're kind of like Eric Little. You feel the presence of God when you run. You feel that that's what God's gifted you to do, and that's where we really get into our sweet spot.
Yeah, is when we know God has you doing this, or in this place, or sitting in this place, or being in this atmosphere. You know God's got you there. Yeah, that's those games that we play that are worth the candle in the spiritual realm. Those are the things that we need to do more of. Yeah,
I don't know. It's a great story, dude.
Yeah, it's a good point. I've seen a little bit of, what I love it when somebody just picks up running for, one girl in particular, I remember. We did a class at the place where I used to work. We had 30-something people that went through the class. And there's one girl who is still running today. Mm-hmm. And she loves it, and it's her thing. And I love to watch somebody who kind of grabs a hold of it, and it's a lot of fun to watch that happen. Because I've seen a lot of the other side too. Sure. Some people would try it for a week or two, and then they put it down because it's like, I don't want to do that.
Well, but we got to be honest. It's not for everybody.
Yeah.
For some people it may be something else, and that's why people have joked through the years. They say you need to start a whatever for God.
Yeah.
And my answer is always the same. Yeah, that would be awesome. You need to do that.
Yeah.
Because what they're saying is their sweet spot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the Run for God ministry, that came out of my sweet spot. But it's why there's so many. It's why I love to see all the different ministries.
Yeah.
Because those ministries, while, I'm sure there's a sow for God out there.
Yeah.
A sowing ministry. That is not where I see the awe of God.
Right.
But for some people it could be.
Yeah.
I'm able to create this thing and bring it to life, and it started from thread, and God has given me that ability. I see that. I get that. And that's why ministry is so important. It's meeting people where they are in those moments where they can see God. And that's what I love about this ministry, is because we hear it every day. Just like Michelle's story, she sees the hand of God in doing this hard thing. And
amen.
I don't know.
Good stuff.
While you're working hard to keep your body in shape physically, the music you listen to while you run can help keep you in shape spiritually. We've partnered with J Radio to put together a group of running playlists by Dean, Lane, Holly, myself, and others that you hear here on the Run for God podcast. Plus, you can listen to a playlist put together by members of Run Club just like you. Check out the whole station of Run for God playlist at jradio.com and in the J Radio app.
All right, every week I share a reason why running or walking is so awesome. And this week, I don't know if you ever thought about this, but if you live in the United States, you are probably at least a little better than most people in the country with the metric system.
That is true.
Right? Because we know what a kilometer is.
Right.
Most people they have no idea what a kilometer is, but we know what a 5K is. We know it's 3.1 miles, and so we can make that conversion way better than the average person in the United States can. So I think that's pretty cool. We know that there's 1,600 meters in a mile, and that a kilometer is 0.6 of a mile. And so that's pretty cool. Now, it doesn't extend to other measurements. We still don't know what a kilogram is for the most part, most people.
But do you get tripped up when it's a 7K? We know 5K is 3.1 miles. And just for those of you out there who may not know, this is my rule of thumb. This is not exact. So don't send me emails saying, well, that's not right.
Yeah.
So a 7K would be 4.2 miles, roughly. You take whatever the number is of the K and multiply it times 6. And that's going to get you a 5K times 6.
That's pretty
3
good.
miles. So
that's
just take that number, and that's going to get you close. It's not exact, so don't send me hate mail. But that is my rule of thumb, is just take the number and multiply it times 6, and that's going to get you within a tenth or so.
That's I need to put that on the Bible tips of the day. That's a pretty good tip. I like that.
So how have you always done it?
I just know it's.
You just know it.
I just know a kilometer is 0.6 of a mile. So I guess that's what I do in my head,
It
but
is.
I never
It's
really.
just a different way
I
to
just
do it,
never thought about it. I thought, that's pretty cool. Yep. Oh, we drink 1 liter bottles, so we know what that is. The one that trips me up more than any other though is temperature. Right? I mean, Celsius versus that's all.
When Tom and Val were here, they were talking in Celsius. And
oh my goodness!
I can't do the equation. Zero is not.
0 is
freezing.
32.
Zero is way below freezing, and you shouldn't be outside.
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, this past week there was controversy. Noah Lyles, he's the 100-meter world champion, and he made this comment. He said that track championships are true world championships. NBA basketball calls its winner the world champion, World Series world champion. The NFL winner, they call themselves world champions. But the truth is that what he was basically saying is, those aren't true world championships. The major leagues is just the United States. And yes, it is the best league in the world, but it's still not everybody in the world. And in track, you get all the best people in the world to run. It's a good point. But obviously I can see the look on your face.
It's just one of those points you just don't say out loud. I mean,
well, Noah Lyles. Yeah. Of course, you know him. He'll say it in a way that's a little endearing. He got a response from Giannis. I'm not even sure how to say this guy's name. He's an NBA guy though. And he said, I wanted to back him up so bad. He received so much backlash for stating the obvious. I don't think in any other sport you're called the world championships. In soccer, which is way bigger than the NBA and more popular than the NBA, the UEFA Champions League, champions don't call themselves world champions. When they win the World Cup, they play against the USA team. They play against teams around the world, countries around the world. Then they say world champs. Yeah, I just think I thought it was an interesting controversy anyway.
I can't believe it rose to the level of controversy though. That's...
Well, this guy's got a lot of social media followers and he's a world champion.
I guess anything can be controversial.
Yeah, it really can. It really can. But I still think he's right. I think there's a good point. A good example is baseball. This last year they had the World Baseball Championships and they had all these countries from all over the world. The United States didn't win.
Yeah.
We claim that we have the best league and I absolutely believe that we do. Right. But Japan beat us.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of, growing up, or when Lane was growing up, we kind of made the joke of, you have a team and they say they're Little League world champions. Well, there's 37 different ways of skinning that cat of where everybody, but Lane, because Lane always said, there's one USA triathlon, and if you're national champion, you're national champion. It's there's not 50 different governing bodies.
That's right.
To go by. So I get his comment, but some things are just best left unsaid sometimes.
Well, I think what I like the most about this is it got track and field in the spotlight and got talked about by people who are not track and field fans.
There's no bad publicity.
Yeah. So I kind of liked it from that standpoint. So I think that's what Noah Lyles was trying to accomplish. So we had our Diamond League finals this past weekend, which is that's the most prestigious.
I watched every minute of it.
Yeah, there's only 4.
No, I really
there's
didn't.
only 4 hours of it. You couldn't. And there were some interesting things that happened. Gudaf Sagai, she is an Ethiopian. She set the world record for the women's 5K, 14 flat, 0.2.
Wow.
Yes, that's impressive. My goodness, I'm still just amazed by that. It was a great race. There was a lady that was right behind her, pushing her the whole way, who also finished almost. She was right near the old world record, which was 14:05. So great run by Gudaf Sagai. She's another one of those who's ubiquitous on the running scene. We see her all the time. Pole vault, a new pole vault record, was also set, and of course he has set. Armando Duplantis has set a number of world records, but that was cool. And then maybe the most impressive thing, I say that the 5K record is probably the most impressive thing, but the one that interested me the most was that Yared Nuguse set the American record in the mile. Mm-hmm. So the American record in the mile has been 3:46. He ran 3:43, which is crazy fast. I mean, he was less than a second off the world record. Mm-hmm. And so that's pretty impressive. And what's funny about this is back in the winter, you know, we interviewed Alan Webb, mm-hmm. and I spent a lot of time with Alan Webb, and Alan Webb he predicted it. He said Yared Nuguse would break his record this year.
Yeah.
And
that's how I found out about it. Is I saw Alan's post congratulating him.
Yeah.
About it. But yeah, I mean, to me, the it's not the funny part of it. Lane come up telling me about it, and he said that Ingebrigtsen, who actually won the race, they were interviewing him before, saying that Nagoose was wanting to break the world record, and Ingebrigtsen said, "Well, if he'll just stick right behind me, he'll break the American record." And I thought, it's true, but it's so arrogant,
He says stuff like that all the time.
Yeah. We've talked about him more than once on here. But, you can't argue with his ability. He was less than a second from the world record. I think, did Lane say that he has the third fastest time now, but 1, 2, and 3 are all within like 0.7 of a second of each other? Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah, there was a third and fourth fastest time.
So you have to think, because when Ingebrigtsen, Lane showed me the video, when he finished, he didn't look gassed at all.
He never does.
But, it's less than 0.7 of a second. It's like, that could be anything. Yeah. It's amazing that those records fall just that razor thin when you're talking about an event that's that long, 4 laps around the track. There's so many things that. Yeah. That's interesting.
It's pretty cool. And then Grant Fisher the next day, by the way, Ingebrigtsen also won the 3K the next day by 1/100 of a second. But Grant Fisher set the American record in the 3K the next day. He finished third in the 3K. So that was pretty impressive because Grant Fisher hasn't had a great year. He's been injured and had some other problems. And so it was good to see him finish a year off really well. So hopefully that bodes well for him in the Olympics next year. That's what I'm hoping. And, with Nagoose, who knows? Just a little bit more, and maybe he beats Ingebrigtsen. He and Ingebrigtsen were. This was a world-class field, and they were a full 3 or 4 seconds ahead of the next runners. They were way out in front of them. So that was pretty cool. All right. Well, here's a cool story. There's a guy in Massachusetts who they're claiming now is the biggest cross-country fan ever. His name is Mike Mahon, and here's the beginning of an article from Jonathan Galt in Let's Run. He said, Mike Mahon on September 7th, 1985, Mike Mahon headed to Franklin Park in Boston to watch the Northeast Cross Country Invitational. 23 years old and infatuated with the sport, 1985 was the year Mahon went from fan to superfan and started logging his meets. It was the first of 37 races Mahon would attend that fall, but even after that prolific inaugural season, Mahon had no idea he'd still be at it nearly 4 decades later, shouting the following words to unsuspecting parents. "Welcome to my 2000th career cross-country meet. Thanks for coming." That's crazy, isn't it?
That it kind of, when you said biggest cross-country fan, my mind immediately goes to your old high school coach.
Yeah.
He shows up at all kinds of meets.
He does. Well, this guy, he's a big fan of the Canadian Football League. He owns over 60 custom jerseys and wears one to every meet he attends. The name and number are always the same. Impala 33. I don't know what the significance of that is. Tuesday's jersey was one Mahon has never worn before, a gray and navy blue Montreal Alouettes jersey from the mid-2010s. Ronnie James, the Alouettes equipment manager at the time, sent Mahon this jersey back in 2015, and Mahon promised he would save it for a special occasion. Meet number 2000 certainly qualifies. Man, 2,000 meets across 38 seasons, an average of more than 52 meets per year.
Wow.
That is particularly impressive when you consider cross country. It's a fall sport. It's only done in the fall. So that's just incredible. He doesn't drive. He has reached almost every meet by some combination of bicycle and or public transportation. And Meet 2000 was easy. It's a 2-mile bike ride from his Framingham home. The journey to meet number 1998 Saturday MSTCA relays in Attleboro was trickier. To ensure Mahon made the 26-mile journey on time, he left his apartment at midnight on Friday, stopping a few times along the way. He was in Attleboro by 6:30 a.m., 2.5 hours early for the first race of the day. Over the years, Mahon has biked thousands of miles to cheer on tens of thousands of runners while collecting hundreds of thousands of cans, which he redeems at Framingham Liquors to fund his year-end banquet, a rollicking gathering where Mahon hands out dozens of awards and a catered meal to the best runners in the Metro West area. Most banquets end with one of Mahon's famous phrases, and that was quite an accomplishment. So on August 8th, Mahon's bike was stolen while he was shopping at CVS. The timing was not great. Cross-country season was just a few weeks away, and no bike equals no cross-country. Within days, a GoFundMe had raised $2,345 for a replacement, a black and green Specialized model that Mahon proudly displayed on Tuesday. What a great story.
It is.
That's just, again, we go back to the passion. I just love to see people that have passion about something. You mentioned Coach Westbrook. He has such a passion for running and runners and trying to be helpful.
So I know we see him at a lot of meets, but I've always assumed that the days we're not seeing him, he's at some other meet. Does he do that? Does he go to a meet?
He shows up with Tryon High School.
Oh,
that's
why we see him intermittently.
Yeah, he has a house in Tryon that his daughter lives at, where his mother.
Well, I knew
lived.
that,
but
I didn't know. So does he have some kind of relationship with the school?
He just supports the school. It's the high school he went to, and so he still supports it.
I didn't know that part.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
That makes more sense now.
So the ones you see him at very often are the ones that are Tryon.
Okay, that makes
and of course, he used to.
But still, he doesn't have to go to these meets. No. He doesn't have a kid or a grandkid there.
Well, those aren't the only ones. I mean, he'll show up for the SEC championship. He goes to the ACC. Of course, Alan Drosky, the Georgia Tech coach, was his athlete back in the day, and so he shows, and he would show up at some of our Georgia Tech meets. He would show up at some of our Dalton State meets, just to be supportive of people he knows.
Sure.
He has coached a lot of people who have become coaches over the years, so he has a lot of meets to go to just to support his old runners.
He's got a legacy.
He sure does. Yep. All right, how about a trivia question for this week? There was a running boom in the 1970s in many countries in the world. It was most pronounced in the USA. What event is credited with kicking off the running boom of the 1970s in the USA? Do you know the answer to that one?
No.
Oh, well, if you know the answer to that one, you can send it to dean@runforgod.com. And if you're the first person to answer, you will win $20 off in the Run for God store. So
I feel like I should know that.
You should know that. You absolutely should know that one. I thought that was a really easy question, so I'm very surprised.
Think about it. Yeah, I'm going to have to.
Yeah, maybe you'll figure it out. Well, we'll leave you with this motivational thought of the week. It comes from Pablo Picasso. He said, "Inspiration exists, but it has to find you working." That's a good point, right? You can find
very well put statement.
Yeah, you can find motivation to get out there and run or walk, but you have to be willing to meet that motivation halfway, right?
Sure.
If you want to do it. All right, that's 183 episodes. We so appreciate everybody out there who listens faithfully and comes back every week to listen to us ramble about running and faith. And we just hope that God uses us in a way that can be uplifting to Him. But also, hopefully, we learn a little bit about running along the way as well. So, until next week, may God bless every step of every run and or walk. Go out there and shine your light.
Great job, Dean.
For more information about the Run for God ministry, go to runforgod.com. If you have questions about your salvation, click on the Peace with God tab. There's nothing more important. Thanks for joining us today.